Pubescens, the most common orchid of New England. Beautiful as ever. I love it. One of my favorites. Thalia hurtella, or common thalia. It's a moss that grows on trees and rocks in sunnier areas, but that are still moist. Some Bryorandisonia lysabara, or the spoonleaf moss, with Polysticium arcrostochoides. It's a difficult one to say. I'm still getting it, but Bryorandisonia I finally got. Entering a healthy oak woodland. Very low levels of invasive plants. Large trees. Understory is intact. So although this is pastureland, this is intact pastureland. This is pastureland that wasn't taken over by invasive plants. It's probably like a 100-year-old forest. Look at all the thudium. Beautiful. Corylus corneta, or the beaked hazelnut. The little birch family plant. These are the catkins, and it'll send up this little fuzzy, almost fuzzy red like flower thing that'll catch pollen from nearby plants. And then it'll make a nut where these are, it's shaped like a pinch. I'll show you it in the summer. They're quite common, so this means that this upland is turning into a birch oakland. A common understory type. Because we got the black birches, and we got Carpinus carolinea. That's what that one is, with the kind of marcescent leaves. That's what this tree is here. There's also witch hazels, which aren't related, but they're a flowering one. And the oaks up here, some of them died from the gypsy moth infestation, so they're starting to, they're dead, more or less. Trees, dead stands. And then birches and maples will take over. That's what this small tree is. I believe, okay, just birches. Yeah, that's what this is. This is a Betula lenta. And this was a Quercus rubra. Still is, but now decaying. Lots of good mushrooms on there. Fern slope. These are quite common, and they're quite diverse. But sparsely diverse. Like, they have a lot of different plants that can grow on them, but the plants they're not very dense. Pretty much what's dense in here is the Christmas fern. And you'll get occasional things growing here and there. It's cool to see that there's no barberry here. Typically these habitats are infested with barberry. And it's interesting because right down the river, or right up the river, which is about that way, barberry and invasive plants are everywhere, and this one is intact. Which is just so cool. But I'm sure there's invasive plants starting. There always is. But it's cool to see that this one hasn't been hit yet. We have a fraxinus, or ash trees, and this one's dead because of the emerald ash borer, which made that borehole, that perfectly circular borehole. And if you see an ash with a perfectly circle borehole from a woodpecker and it's dying, it's probably from the ash borer. And the reason why there's a perfectly centered hole is because the woodpeckers go and get it. But the woodpeckers wouldn't go get it if the emerald ash borer wasn't in the tree already. And the emerald ash borer is also a very common thing in these trees, an infestation level. So there's plenty of food here for the bird to pick at, so that's why these end up dying. And they eat the green layer, but they don't burrow into the wood much. They just eat the green layer, girdle the tree, and then it dies. So eventually there'll be less ashes here. Saplings don't seem to be hit as much, and eventually I feel like the population will level out, and these will slowly make their way back into forests from like the seedlings and whatnot, or they all die out, which I don't think will happen. Get higher into the upland and away from the valley, you can see the invasives start coming back. These are all barberries. And eventually, once you reach the top, you basically get an invasive thicket. Ooh. That happens all the time, don't worry about it. So we got a few spice bush, but we just got little thickets of barberry, and I bet you they just get denser and denser the higher you go up and closer to the pasture. So heading to the upland former pasture lands of an intact forest. Look at this beautiful American beech right here. We got big black birch. We still got a few hemlocks here and there. A nice red oak right here. Or is that an ash? Oh, that's a red oak. More beeches right there. These are all hemlocks. birches. White oak is right here. That's another red oak. I'm heading towards the top of this little hill. It's like 390 feet. And towards some pine oak uplands, signifying a drier west slope, which towards the top of the hill it is quite drier. And that's where the hemlocks start to end, right here. And then it fades to white pine up on the hot, dry west slope. Not too many rocks. I mean, you start getting a little bit rocky towards the highlands. But there was very few rocks along the slope in general. Pine oak heathlands. Starting to get all this black huckleberry, this galusha, baccata, bassiata, little heath with the birches and some pines and oaks. A heath pine oakland. One thing to note about these uplands is that they tend to be pretty sparse in herbaceous ground covers, like stuff that isn't a shrub. It's predominantly heath shrubs, like this blueberry. That's a low bush blueberry. And, you get your birches, and that's a big blueberry right there. You'll get saplings, but you don't get a whole lot of green, like evergreen stuff, or just like kind of fleshy stuff, or just forbs in general. Because the leaf layer up on these uplands is so thick and it's so shady. So the stuff that can survive is usually exposed just a little bit and can tolerate deep shade, like these caryxes and these polytrichums, and a few different lichens. It's where you start meeting where the uplands becomes like a glade, where it gets really rocky and sparse and open. That's where you get a lot more forbs. Higher in the rockier you get mountain laurel, or the drier you get. This is all Kalmia latifolia. It forms dense, almost very unfun thickets to pass through, but common everywhere where there's kind of thin, dry soils that are acidic, like up here. Here on the hill, and I was gonna make myself some lunch, peanut butter and jelly, with that nice ass Dave's bread. It's basically superfood. But I forgot my damn knife, so I'm gonna have to improvise with like a stick or something. I have like a big Bowie knife in here, but it's like, do I really want to do that to the knife? I kind of don't. I got flint and steel, but I'm not gonna do that to the flint and steel either. So I don't know what I'll do. My sandwich is flat little sticks like that to make it. And then I left some for the animals. You always gotta leave some for the animals. oak Kalmia land, oak laurel land, a few hemlocks interspaced. Very common habitat in uplands. Kind of unfun to hike through because it's so thick. But beautiful nonetheless. Crossing into an upland glade from the oak laurel uplands, or oak Kalmia. It's like a trail runs through here. Though you can see it opens right up. This is rocky, thin soil. What kind of moss we got over here? Polytrichum. For about 380 feet elevation. Goes down and back up. Cool. A little stove, probably a charcoal stove. Cool. Pile of wood for it. All right there. Interesting. Almost looks like a pile of shingles. I wonder if this was a house. That's an old chimney. More than likely not. How a usual hemlock forest looks because of the delgid. It makes them all sparse and fall down and die and open. And this is the likely fate of the valley down below. And once this happens, it starts to take over either with white pine, a mix of birches, red oaks. But this is right on the top of the valley. You can see clear over to the other ridge. And then even you can see a little bit of the river. That's cool. Over there's the Shetucket River. It's considered a large river for this area. Actually, you know, that's a bridge going over the Shetucket River. I believe it is. Or is it the I can't tell from this. I think... Alright, that is in fact the river. That's cool. It's far away. There's the large Shetucket. Flows into the Thames. We have some kind of hypnum. We have a cladonia lichen. We have teeny tiny atrichums right here with those little reds. More lichen. There's little dicranums in here, a little leucobirum. So the dicranums, where were the dicranums? I guess they're all leucobirum. So these little guys are leucobirums. There's larger ones over here, mixed in with that little hyphenum stuff. I don't even know what this one is, but it looks like a hyphenum. You got more atrichum through there, various lichens, little tiny hemlocks coming up through here, right there. Beautiful. Carex. Down the steep slope at the bottom is a brook I was by earlier. So this probably goes down at least 200 or 300 feet. Maybe not 300, probably 200 feet. 200 foot slope. Which is pretty damn good because I was up at 390 out that way. Heading deeper into the Hemlock Valley. The hemlocks are still pretty cut up here. They're not looking too great. But it's still, they're not as fallen as they were upslope. This, I guess, kind of light hemlock slope, light shade hemlock slope. The ground is covered in this calcladium. And look, we got Bassania trilobata and Thudium delicatum too. And these are all small black birches, Spetulentus. Epic this area is. Tons of Bassania. We got a type of polytrichum here all throughout. Got calcladium, more polytrichum, calcladium, Bassania. Oh my god. In this hemlock forest. Oh fuck, it's awesome. Say this is maybe a 70-year-old hemlock forest transitioning to pines up on this ridge, but down there it's more 70 to 90-year-old hemlocks. Hemlocks are pretty, I guess, slow growing, especially growing tight together on a thin-soiled rocky slope. So they're close together, high population, high density, but overall kind of medium age, like 100. I couldn't imagine what this would look like if it was old growth. Huge hemlocks, oh my god. With the moss, it must have been amazing. Now in the future it's going to transition to a birch forest. So it'll become very sticky and impossible to pass through. And then the birches will grow up and it'll be kind of like an open. You'll be able to see pretty far, and then the understory will get replaced from moss to shrubs, and then eventually shrubs to mountain laurel. It'll become a mountain laurel and birch forest. Maybe some pines will move in. And into the kind of glade ridgelands where rocks are really up against the soil, really thin soils. And this is Hedwigia ciliata, so exposed rocks, more or less, with pines and hemlocks. There's even a maple, oaks. It's a big mix. I'm sure there's better views out that way. Maybe. We'll find out. Gaultheria precumbens up here on the slopes. Beautiful eastern teaberry, blueberry family. We have Pinus rajata. This plant right here, pitch pine. And all this cladonia deer lichen, reindeer moss. Got a little blue stem grass. All sorts of weird other lichens. So cool. Quercus ilicifolia, with a bare oak or shrub oak. These typically occur in very sandy or very dry areas that are open, with at least part sun or part shade at least, and only in dry spots. We have solidago bicolor, or silver rod, or white goldenrod. Here's its basal rosette. These bloom in September, and instead of being the typical yellow solidago, they are white or gray, or a light yellow. Beautiful Shetucket River. This is Pleasure Hill right here. Really nice slope right here. Tons of waterfalls along it. It's Pleasure Hill. These are old snow squalls. A weak front just passed through, bringing in, or not really weak, it's very strong, but it's not very wet. And it's bringing in very cold temperatures. It's going to be winter for a week and a half. It's going to be the first time in a few years it's going to be winter for a week and a half down here along the coast. And what I mean by that is the temperatures are going to be steadily below freezing, or below 35 for over a week. This is Trichostemma dichotomum. Trichostemma dichotomum, or the blue curls, the forked blue curls, a little plant in the mint family that blooms at the end of the season in like September and August. It's an upland plant or sandy plant. Open habitats, and it smells interesting. It has these really cute dark purple flowers. Very beautiful. I've also seen them bloom in midsummer as well, in like August. They're beautiful though. A little biannual, or they might even be annuals. And then this is a little hypericum. They call it pinweed or pineweed, and it has little yellow flowers. So this is a pine heath glade with some oaks here and there, but predominantly pine and pitch pine, with some bare oak that I showed you. This is the heath. This is the low bush blueberry. There's also some black huckleberry right here. So that's Vaccinium angustifolium, and then that is Galusha baccata. We got your Kalmia latifolia, your Pinus strobus. Beautiful habitat. shaggy and poofy this polytrichum is. I've never seen them so tall before. This thing's like 5 inches tall. I usually see them like, they're like a quarter. They're like off the ground, they're like this tall. And these ones, I mean, they're on like a rock or a stump or something, but they're still pretty damn tall for a polytrichum. They're typically more like this size, not these towering honkers. Up in this windy oak Kalmia land with some pines. Hemlock, it fell and then regrew. That's cool. We're in a hemlock maple forest, so there's kind of spread out red maples. That's what most of the ground cover is. Here's a big one, and then most of the trees in here are eastern hemlock. And then we have a big multi-stemmed white pine. There's a big red oak over there, but that has succumbed. That one's dying or dead. This is like a 4-stem? Yeah, 4-stem white pine. They call these wolf pines because they're many stems. It's probably 7 feet across at the base. I overestimate, probably 6. But still a rather big boy. Oh, these are fast growing, especially in floodplains. That floodplain, that's a hemlock floodplain right there. That's the first hemlock floodplain I've ever found. Completely stripped of its duff layer. I want to check this place out in the summer to see what the heck grows after something like this, you know? Maybe it's just a slow transition of this lowland to more of a rich herbaceous floodplain instead of a coniferous one. So I already don't see much signs of any undergrowth. Very sparse, maybe a sapling or two. And eventually it'll start eating away at these hemlocks, and that'll result in them dying, and then further mix-up of this ecosystem. I mean, they're already declining anyways because of the adelgid. So this will put a nail in the coffin. It'll change. Things change. That's what they do. So cool, though. Every angle's beautiful here. Goodness gracious. Gorgeous hemlock forest. Gorgeous brook. Gorgeous steep slopes. Gorgeous. Here used to be a little dam for this little woodland road, and they put these concrete pipes here for drainage. But because of flooding or just erosion, those are now useless. So you can imagine the road went over those by a few inches. So most of it's been washed downstream. And the water in here was likely a few inches higher, and it was more like kind of like a swamp. Cool stuff. Homestead here was probably abandoned 30 or 40 years ago, if not a little sooner. I'd say 30 or 40, and they just kept haying it for the next probably 20, and then it was probably sold to this conservation group probably 5 to 10, at most 15 years ago, and it's been at least 5 years since it's last been cut. So that's what you see, the transition of kind of like a pasture meadow to a invasive land. And then once invasive land takes over, you'll slowly get some forest species in here. There's another abandoned building. It's two. I think there's a total of 4 of them. Just little sheds, little cottages that probably work the land. Probably for 40 years or more. Probably between the early, I wouldn't be surprised if this was inhabited for hundreds of years, but that building there is probably from the late 1800s and probably stood for maybe 50 to 100 years, and then the people moved out because farming in New England is more or less unprofitable unless it's cows.